Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 8 of TED Talks Art and the first episode of the new year. Happy New Year to everyone. And what's pretty common, I guess, is to make New Year's resolutions. I personally don't really do that, mainly because I think it's important to always be setting some kind of goal regardless of what time of the year it is. That being said, I thought it's appropriate for this new episode of the year to discuss what it means to become a successful artist. And a lot of times, of course, that comes down to short-term and long-term goals that an artist sets out to do. But sometimes I think where the error lies in which kind of determines or affects what our expectations are and where we go is, especially I notice with younger people, is perhaps this idea of having to have a really clear, specific goal and specific path to get there. And for some, I guess that works, but the danger in that, I think, is that's assuming a lot of things will come together, especially things that are beyond your control. And when I look back at where my career has gone, and when I discuss this with other artists, and from what I hear and read and listen to from online, like a lot of you, is that even for the very successful artists or the ones that we really are well known and we look up to, more often than not you hear it didn't go exactly the way they had envisioned or even planned, but in many ways better than they thought or could even imagine. Now that doesn't mean it was all success, and many times you hear that it was a lot of failures. I mean, I think Bobby Chiu recently had released his book on audio for free on YouTube, and he talked about how he set up a studio because he couldn't get a job, and this is after being the top of his class and all that, and is out of necessity and out of frustration, but still having this passion to do what he wants to do. He set up his own studio, and out of that failure it turned into success. But I think part of it is what determines success and what's that definition. And I would say there's two perspectives. There's the outside perspective, looking at the artist, and either by other artists or non-artists, and it's their version or what they think or picture as success. And then there's the other perspective, and that is of the artist themselves. Now, the outside perspective might have a more common definition, whereas the perspective of the artist is certainly very different because we're all so unique, not only in our personalities and our art styles and skill set, but what we define as success, and more specifically, what we define as something that is satisfying. For example, an outsider's point of view of a successful artist, well, what are the things that define it? It's things that are very visible and very easy to measure. For example, how much they earn, so there's the money factor, how prestigious or well-known their IP is, or the IPs that they work on, their resume. These days with social media, how many Instagram likes they have. Because these are all very visible, they're very accessible, and they're easy to measure. And there's some truth to it, for sure, of course. You know, why is it that Pixar is as good as they are? And why are they as successful as they are? Is it because they're terrible artists? No, obviously not. They're very skilled at both design, animation, world building, storytelling. And they do it in a way that it taps into a majority of the mainstream audience, right? Which is where you get your biggest, profit or acceptance, however, I guess. That being said, and it's the same with music, pop music, right? But the main ingredient, though, of course, is they're very passionate about what they do. And out of that passion, they're able to do everything else and still make it lucrative and be smart about how they market and all that. But from the other perspective, now this is the artist perspective, some agree, and that's what they want. They want that money, they want the accolades, they want the prestigious projects and the IP. And on the opposite spectrum might be, well, even if I don't earn a living off this, but as long as I have the opportunity to draw or paint or whatever, just for my own enjoyment, I will be satisfied. And then there are artists that fall somewhere in between that spectrum, okay? But I think the common thing from one end to the other of that spectrum, even the ones that want the accolades and the money and all that, the ones that are successful, they don't necessarily do it solely because of that. What do we always hear from artists of every sector of industry is we don't do it for the money, we do it for the love of it, the love of art. Whether it's animation, comic books, cartoons, illustration, fine arts, cosplay, I don't know, whatever. That's the movies, that's what you hear, is the ones that, especially the ones that are successful from the public point of view in terms of revenue and notoriety, right? What do these creators say? It's the passion that fueled it. And the fact that it was success is a huge bonus on top of that. It's never the case where, wow, this is so amazing, so lucrative, and so critically acclaimed, and the creator says, oh, I just did it for the money. Yeah, there's a little bit of that sometimes, but the majority isn't doing that. And even if it was for the money, can you imagine how much better it would be if the passion drove it before the money? And so that's the defining factor. So I think the key, though, is, and again, to try to speak more globally to all artists, is that you want to be very clear about, I guess, specific in the sense of where you kind of envision your the passion and outlet for your art, but be very open to the path. So know your destination. Right? Be specific about your destination, but not necessarily specific and definitely not rigid about the path to get there. Because you never know what opportunities you may miss or may come your way, or you find something even greater that you didn't realize was even an option, and you love that more. I know for myself, I knew I wanted to draw. I knew I wanted to do something in entertainment, and more specifically, like, comics or art or comic books or animation. So specifically comic books. So that's why I went to the Kubert School in Jersey, which I've talked about before. But by the end of second year, I realized comics isn't where I want to be because it's very difficult to get into. It's very volatile, and a lot of art jobs are volatile. Like I ended up eventually freelancing. That's very volatile. But specifically the nature of the comic book industry, by that point I realized it wasn't for me. But it doesn't mean it completely blocked it out. The ironic thing is, after working in games for about 7 years, I had the opportunity to do a kid's graphic novel. So there you go, all things come full circle. On the opposite spectrum is, because I started out in games and did a big chunk in games and still do from time to time, and because I teach in programs related to game development, the assumption would be, oh, Ted wanted to become specifically an artist in video games. And, it makes sense why that might be the assumption based on what I just said before. But what I say, especially these days, is I didn't set out to become a video game artist or video game concept artist. I set out to become an artist, and that just happened to include games, among other things. And so, again, that's what I mean. Having a destination that's pretty clear, but being very open and flexible to the path, scenic route, the direct route, depending on the situation, all those things allowed me and afforded me the career that I have now. Other things are the definition between what you need and what you want. As artists, we're always kind of split because on the one hand, art is very personal, It can be very emotional. But then on the flip side of it is the practical concerns of I need to earn a living. So necessity, I need to pay the bills. I want to create my art. And what is every artist's goal? Somehow to blend those two things. Sometimes they overlap a little bit. Sometimes they don't overlap at all. Sometimes they'll overlap completely, which is ideal. But a lot of times it doesn't stay that way, or at least it's not like that all the time. But I think the key again is just to be open and see things from another angle. I love that line from Big Hero 6, where Hero is desperately trying to come up with some innovative project to get into the robotics program at the university, and he can't come up with anything. He's at the end of his rope, and his brother picks him up and literally shakes him and says, we got to shake things up, look for a new angle, and then from there he gets the inspiration for the microbots. And that's how we have to kind of look at things, not only in our art or the art that we're working on at that moment, not only as our career as an artist, but also in life. For example, when I got laid off at Pseudo Interactive because, as I've mentioned, at that point, money's running out, and it's pretty commonplace for a lot of these studios that eventually close their doors. Is who do they let go? Senior and middle management, because they're the most expensive. And that happened to 10 of us or so at the same time. So, I'm thinking, well, what am I going to do? And, losing all this, all of a sudden I don't have this income. It's just now my wife, and we have mortgage and planning a family. And the first thing you think of are those kind of things like, what about, if we're planning for a family, what about daycare? I need to earn a living. But then there's the flip side. Oh, wait a second. Since I'm at home and now I'm going to become a freelancer, we don't need daycare. I can take care of my daughter at home. So the income that I didn't have anymore, what I made up for is, I don't have the expense. Conversely, years later, at its most expensive point when both kids were in daycare, they're not anymore, they're older and they're in school, but we had to pay $14,000 a year for daycare. So that's a huge expense. Well, why? Because now I'm not home and I'm out working more. So I'm earning more, but to offset that, it's offset by the expense. So it's not always about earning money. It's also about how you spend it, or that sort of thing. And it's different for everyone. That comes down to what's important to you, what matters to you, what is enjoyable to you in terms of your livelihood. Do you need the expensive home and living or car, or are you okay with something simpler or modest or something in between? To each their own, right? So in that same regard, it flip-flops. Yeah, money is always a factor, but that's for especially the very passionate, it's never the priority, right? It's worked around their passion so somehow they can make it. And so it's being flexible in all those things about necessity, but also about what's personally satisfying as an artist. And we need to kind of break down and pursue those things, and they change. And because life changes, your circumstances change, your wants and needs change, your outlook and experiences change things. But that final destination is always the same. So what I always say, given how things have changed and I could never have foreseen the trajectory of my career, what I tell students, what hasn't changed the moment I decided to go to art school and now is my love and need to draw. And that's always been there, and it continues to grow and never be satiated. So the destination is clear, but there's many paths, and being open to the different routes, especially when a detour is forced in your way. I think one thing that is the same for all artists, regardless of their skill level, experience, and opportunities they may or may not have, is the importance of being able to have some kind of creative outlet that is satisfying or worthwhile to you as an artist personally, whether or not you earn a living from that thing. And I think because of this day and age right now, with especially internet and social media, other people's work is just a click away, and all of a sudden the world becomes a much smaller place. And when we see these really amazing artists, of course it would make sense that they're able to get a lot of work or be able to do what they love and get paid for it. That it does make sense. But once in a while, I guess when we see someone of a certain caliber who is not using that as their main, I guess, source of income, we're a little surprised or taken aback, or maybe even think, oh, that's too bad, or even a shame. Recently, I was watching this interview with Bobby Chu, and he was interviewing this Bulgarian artist, Viktor Kaldichev. Some of you have probably heard of him or at least seen his work. He's got a Kickstarter, I think, going on right now, or maybe it's almost finished or is finished, called Inspire. And he's an amazing illustrator, and he's done work for comics and games and things like that. But from what I recall in the interview, his main 9 to 5 job isn't that stuff, isn't the art that he does, that he likes to do, or even that book that he's doing. That's purely for himself. And obviously he's very good, so I wouldn't doubt it'd be successful and he can earn something from it. But he did mention his main source of income is more of a stable 9 to 5. I think it's still art related, but it's not exactly maybe what he would want to do. And the whole reason is simply based on priorities, right? His wife and his kids, and given his rough, I guess, experience growing up in Bulgaria, and the whole point of him, I guess, living in France now is to give his kids a better life. It's that immigrant story. And you can compare that to, I'm sure every one of us has heard or met someone who's an amazing singer. In fact, they're so amazing, you first thought is they're a professional singer. If not, they should be. And we might think, if that's not what they're doing, oh, what a shame. It's not a shame if they're completely happy, right? Not everyone who has a certain skill set has a need or desire to equate that to a certain job or way of, or earning a living from it, right? Now, I can relate a little bit because since I have technically way more training in music than I do art. I've mentioned before I don't even have an art degree. I only did 2 years out of art school of a 3-year program. But I did, 10 years of piano, 8 years of violin, self-taught guitar. I like to compose. I like to fool around also with electronic music. I sing. I can carry a tune, but it's, I'm not the greatest singer, nor do I particularly have this buzz or desire to perform, even though I have performed before. And as much as I still love music, it's always taken a backseat to art, especially as I get older. Again, it's not, I could either look at it as, oh, what a waste of all that training. No, not really, because it's part of my life. It's a hobby. It's a serious hobby. It brings enjoyment. It's just the fact of the matter that art always was more important to me. And so based on that, even where I am in my career and being that kind of in-between generation in terms of art schools and technology and the onset of the internet and the gaming industry and how that's all changed in that same manner, and it goes with the life stage. If I was 10 years younger, that would be different, but you go with where your situation and circumstances. I'm at the point now that I have a more stable work environment and don't freelance as much because I don't need to, and I enjoy teaching. It's still related to what I enjoy, which is art and game development and mentoring. But these days I put most of my any time and energy I do have on my own personal projects. And it's not necessarily lucrative, nor am I gunning for it to be lucrative. Just like that, the book, The Cure and Prophecy that I did recently. it's all about having that opportunity or outlet to create and express yourself, and if you can earn a living from it, great, but don't let that be the main requirement or the necessary requirement that allows you to do that, or it governs your idea of success and satisfaction, because that can easily get very misconstrued. It would be a shame for someone who has all the potential and has all the passion, but as this expectation that they should earn a living a certain way through it, and if it doesn't work, they give up and never pick up a pencil again. That would be a real shame. Again, I've mentioned in previous videos some time ago that even my decision to go to art school, I thought of what is the best worst case scenario, and that would be I go to school and never end up actually earn a living as an artist. Well, I would still be drawing as a hobby, and art school would have launched me to sharpening and continuing to sharpen my skill set and enjoy art in my life in the same way that music is for me right now. Right? I've never sought after pursuing a music career in some manner. It's always been, no, it's something I enjoy. Maybe when I was younger, like in my youth, I toyed with the idea of maybe pursuing a career as a classical musician, like in piano, but it wasn't anything too serious. It didn't really last. And so I think that's the key, because we're all so different in our skill set and situation and our beliefs and priorities. I think the commonality from the top tier to the new and young aspiring artist is that what's the same in all those scenarios is these artists are all doing what they really love and somehow have an outlet for it, whether or not they get paid, but their success isn't solely determined by their income or their notoriety. So that's my 2 cents worth, and I hope, as always, it helps some of you out there. Until next time, take care.